it's downloaded. When would it be uploaded, Jane?
It will be uploaded at the end of the forum, so after Friday.
Okay, and the slides should be made available as well to all participants. Right, so if you can confirm when the video started, Jane.
Yep, it's recording.
It already has. Brilliant, fantastic. Welcome everyone to this afternoon's session of the East Suffolk Community Partnership Annual Forum. So hopefully you're all here for the right one, which is focusing this afternoon on making travel more active and sustainable. So obviously a really important and interesting subject for us. So I'm Nick Khan. I'm a director at East Suffolk Council, and I'm very pleased to be hosting today and chairing. I'll hopefully keep things to time. Just a few housekeeping rules, if I may. One of which is, can everyone please mute their microphones? I can hear a bit of background noise. So if you're not familiar with Teams, there's a little button in your top right corner that looks like a microphone. If you can just press that, a line will go through it, and that means you're muted. Press it again if you want to speak at some point later on. Right, so that's that. There's a meeting chat sort of bar on the side if you enable your meeting chat, but just be aware, as we are recording, these things will appear forever and a day, so please refrain from making any derogatory comments or anything like that. But obviously if there are any questions or valid comments you wish to make, use the chat bar. We will be having 2 presentations today from our due soon, so we'll let them do their presentations, and then after each presentation we'll open that up for discussion, comment, questions, so there'll be ample time to do that. So what I'd ask you to do is not ask questions during the presentation, because that can be quite difficult to manage, but we'll save them for after the presentation's done. We'll keep to time as mentioned, and I'll just quickly explain the context of this session today, the meeting. As some of you, most of you hopefully know, in East Suffolk we merged councils last year, which was very successful. We became a very big council as a result, the biggest by population, and we're very big geographically. As part of that merger, we decided to create 8 community partnerships spread about our district, which are all up and running now and are doing some excellent things. But in order to get them up and running, we hosted a number of sessions in those localities, and we asked those attending, representatives of the community, and some of you would have been there, what their priorities were. What did they want to see achieved in their areas? What was important to them? We provided some data, some information, and there were some really good discussions, really good sessions, and some voting. And as a result of that, many of the subjects which are forming part of this week's annual forum, the priorities are being worked on and discussed, and today is no different. This is a transport priority. Many of those community partnerships decided themselves that they wanted transport as a real focus area, and that can be sort of divided into 3 different areas. One was active travel, which we're talking about today. Another was sustainable travel, and then the other one was community transport, which we discussed this morning. So the aim of community partnerships really is to bring the community together, influential local representatives, to look at and focus on priorities that they want to achieve in their area and deliver some results. You know, having that collective coming together is really important, and hopefully we'll appreciate that today, as we've got some really good speakers lined up from the County Council, our very own council, and also Transport East, the strategic transport body. And it's really important that as a community partnership, for the grassroots level and upwards, we work at all levels of the system to achieve what we think are our collective aims around transport. We use our power, our influence. We work with other tiers. We work with the regional transport. We bring things to East Suffolk to deliver. So it's really important today that we get your views on what's important, because we will be using those to formulate some of our plans, priorities, and hopefully actual delivery projects on the ground. So really important that you take part and make clear your views and comments and issues and opportunities. So I think that's me done in that respect. So I'll bring on our first, welcome our first speaker, who is Andrew Summers from Transport East, and he's going to talk to us about active travel. And then, as I mentioned, we'll open that up for some discussion afterwards. So welcome, Andrew. If you wouldn't mind starting your presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick, and good afternoon, everyone. I think I may have met some of you this morning, so good to see you again. And for those joining new this afternoon, good afternoon to you too. So my name's Andrew Summers. I'm the Strategic Director of Transport East. I'll go through briefly what that is in a minute. I'll also confess to a personal interest in this topic as well. In my previous role, I was Strategy and Planning Manager for active travel at Transport for London. So a big proponent of active travel and really keen to work with you, as Nick identified, and this part of the world as well. What I'll do, I'll very quickly run through what Transport East is. I'll get through that quite quickly for those of you that have already heard that this morning. I'll then give a bit of a high-level overview of some of the national issues around active travel and some of the challenges that we face in our part of the world in terms of securing funding for that and some of the hurdles we will have to navigate. But I'm also really keen to hear from all of you about your local experiences of active travel, around the work that you're doing at local level, and what support you would need at that regional level to really help you achieve your objectives for active travel going forwards. So I'll quickly go through the first few slides. Apologies again for those of you that have seen this already this morning, but it's just important just to build on Nick's point that we're working at all tiers of local and regional government to make sure that we deliver a sustainable transport strategy. So Transport East is the single voice for transport in the east of England. It's a partnership covering Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Southend and Thurrock. We're a subnational transport body recognised by government as the voice for transport in our part of the world. And you can see from the map there that there's 6 others covering other parts of England. Some of them are quite well known, such as Transport for the North. We're an up and coming partnership, and we want to get to the point where we're having equal say in government decision making. We're comprised of all 5 transport authorities, so political members and officers are on our forum. All 24 districts, including East Suffolk, which is a member, 3 chambers of commerce, including Suffolk, the 2 local enterprise partnerships, including New Anglia, which covers Suffolk, and Highways England and Network Rail. So I think you can see we've got this partnership forming that is really starting to make that strategic case for transport investment in our part of the world, with Suffolk and East Suffolk key elements of that helping us to drive it forward. So what do we do, and how is this relevant to active travel? Well, basically, we work in partnership to deliver an evidence-based strategy and investment priorities for government. We met the minister a few weeks ago to ask her, what are your priorities for our part of the world? And she said, look, you need to create an evidence base, you need to get a clear strategic direction, you need to work out how you're aligning with government policies, and then work out what your investment priorities are and make sure that they're well communicated to government. So that's what we're working on right now, and active travel needs to be a key part of that going forwards. In terms of outcomes that the Transport East Forum has decided that we want to achieve, they're very locally specific, but also play to that national agenda as well. So we want to support our coastal communities, really energising them. We want to support international gateways, so post-Brexit, really making the most of the fact that we've got international ports here that can contribute to that wider UK economy. That multi-centred connectivity, and there's real opportunity here for active travel. 2 cities and 76 towns amongst our region. These are perfect sizes for active travel, and we want to make sure we are developing a sustainable transport system that supports movement in all of those. Decarbonisation, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the key elements of government's national policy. They're wanting to achieve net zero by 2050, and a lot of local partners have earlier aspirations for that. Again, active travel is a key part of that mix. And then supporting local and national economic recovery, particularly coming out of COVID, and then the levelling up agenda as well, which the North of England has coined, but we need to articulate what that means for us and how sustainable transport plays its role. So at a regional level, we have some quite clear goals and a clear task set by government. And what we're about to do over the next few months is embark on a strategy to make sure that we're clear to government about what we're doing. And I'm really keen to get your views on how active travel can support that. So at a national level, this is a good time to be promoting active travel. There's a number of things that have come into play, most notably the DfT's gear change document. Now, this is a document that's been developed by DfT, but with quite a significant influence from Number 10 as well. So Boris Johnson and Andrew Gilligan, who is Boris Johnson's transport advisor, both of whom were in the Mayor of London's team a few years ago and really promoted cycling and walking there. So this is the follow through in terms of that policy direction. So a really good time at the moment to be making the case for active travel investment. I think alongside that, the government has seen a post-COVID opportunity to make sure that active travel is the forefront of recovery. And so the government has announced £2 billion over the next 5 years for the whole of England to effectively bid into to promote active travel in their areas. And as Transport East, what we really want to do is make sure we get a bigger slice of that pie as possible. And that requires us making a compelling economic case and making sure we're working really closely with those local authorities who you'll hear from later on to make sure we're all pulling in the same direction. Some of the key elements from that national picture are around the benefits of active travel. These are well known, but it's well worth repeating these. So one of the key benefits that the government are putting forward is around health. Public Health England are recommending 20 minutes of physical activity each day. Active travel is one of the easiest ways to do this. Indeed, walking is probably the most important way in which people can achieve that. And I think there's significant economic benefits of doing so. Physical inactivity does actually cause 1 in 6 UK deaths and a significant burden on the NHS from having to address those. So a significant economic benefit derived from improving health. As I mentioned earlier, government also has a target for net zero transport emissions by 2050. Mode shift to more sustainable modes of travel is a key element of that. And as part of that, I think we can see it as one of the ways, if implemented correctly, of helping to improve congestion and connectivity and accessibility. Indeed, within the government's plan there, they have a target to double walking and cycling from its current levels, which is quite ambitious, but I think you need to be ambitious to be able to get there. And I think further down, there's a piece there around cycling's contribution to the wider economy. There's a growing evidence base about this, about how cycling and walking supports the wider economy. There are direct benefits there that are articulated in the gear change of 5.4 billion to the economy, 64,000 jobs. And I guess that's not including the additional benefits that you might get from improving your place, make it more attractive for people to walk and cycle around, and potentially improving local economic environments. So quite a strong picture there set out by government. It's worth us looking at where we are collectively in the east of England, because our challenge is going to be to persuade government to invest in our part of the world. So private car currently dominates personal travel here. So we're starting with quite a challenge. About 78% of commuting trips pre-COVID were taken by car, and a significant amount of carbon emissions actually come from road vehicles. So we've got quite a difficult place to start from, but there is some potential for mode shift there. Already 3% of people across our region cycle, and 11% walk. Walking, I guess, is often one of the overlooked pieces of the transport policy mix, but actually significant contributor to getting people to do active travel. There's a lot of trips currently made that could be made by active travel modes if those barriers were broken down for people. So each year, the average person in the East makes 223 trips under 1 mile, and you could argue all of those could be made by active travel if those barriers for those individuals were broken down. 13% of households don't actually have access to a private car. So again, that enforces the need for us to make sure that we've got alternative transport solutions. So quite a significant sort of picture there in the East, a lot of challenge, but there is a lot of potential. So where are the opportunities for us to make that case to government? I think we've got good sized settlements, as I said earlier. It's 2 cities and 76 towns, ideally sized for active travel. Average commute distance of 14 kilometres, so a significant amount of trips that could be made by active travel if the conditions were right for people. Relatively flat and good weather compared to other parts of the country. Those conditions are good for cycling. And we've got quite a bit of offer in terms of tourism and leisure walking and cycling. A significant amount of people visit our region to enjoy the outdoor environment. Walking and cycling could be a key part of that offer going forward that's quite unique to our part of the world. With a slightly older demographic, the popularity of e-bikes is growing. And when we spoke to government a few weeks ago, they thought that the e-bikes could be one of the key elements that helps drive our cycling and walking growth. And I think alongside that, the actual decarbonisation policy shift and momentum that we've got at the minute. As I said earlier, the time is right now to be making these changes. I think in our part of the world, we've got the renewable energy coast, which really adds to that feel of decarbonisation. A number of local authorities have declared climate emergencies, and Transport East itself is really focusing its attention on decarbonisation. So the time does feel right to be making this. And with new post-COVID trip patterns being formed, some of the DFT analysis has shown a 100% increase in cycling trips in some parts of the country following COVID. So there's a significant opportunity there that I think perhaps we could be building on as part of our case for investment. But it's not all easy going. And the next slide, I think, sets out some of those strategic challenges that we still face. And these are the sorts of things that Transport East and local authorities are really having to grapple with in the east of England, bearing in mind the quite significant competition from other parts of England for some of that investment going forwards. I've listed 4 things here. The first one is the evidence base, and that's really about demonstrating the benefits and impacts of investment. So a lot of parts of England are very good once they've implemented schemes of being able to shout about them, of being able to demonstrate the impact of that investment, being able to actually articulate what it means. And I think one of the ways in which we could make that case to government is to start to show those case studies in our part of the world more clearly, really be able to articulate what it is that we're delivering aligned to their objectives. So that evidence base is fundamental. Funding is the second point, and as I mentioned earlier, there's £2 billion available across England, but we're under significant competition from other parts, particularly those metropolitan areas that had quite a head start on us. So London, Manchester, Liverpool, Sheffield, a lot of them have got walking and cycling commissioners in place. A lot of them are already at that national table when these decisions are being made. One of the challenges for Transport East in our part of the world is to make sure that we have that national profile, so we have that clear case for investment going forwards, and that's definitely going to be part of the work that Transport East is doing going forwards. The third element is around that wider policy mix. So a lot of the challenges in implementing walking and cycling have been around how it fits with wider policies. And it can't just be walking and cycling on its own. There has to be a range of other policies that go alongside it to help it. Road safety is one. So one of the biggest barriers we found in London to walking and cycling was safety, or the perception of safety, and the fear of individuals of actually doing walking or cycling because of the potential risks. Now, road safety measures are one of those types of interventions that go alongside walking and cycling to make sure that more people have those barriers broken down, and there's a range of others as well. And I think I've left public support to last, but it's certainly by no means least. And I think this is where community groups can really come in and help to make that case at that regional level. Securing buy-in for this type of investment requires support at all levels, from community to local authority, to regional, to government. There's, I guess, a lot of opposition that could arise if these schemes aren't implemented, and there's disbenefits perceived by some people. So really getting that public support and getting behind it is important. I think in the early days of implementation in London, one of the most notable features in the election campaigns and leading up to the election campaigns of both Boris and then Sadiq Khan was the role of local campaign groups in getting into those manifestos a commitment to grow walking, to grow cycling, and that then fed its way through. So the importance of grassroots support and advocacy in helping to support those wider national policy shifts should not be underestimated at all. So onto my final slide here, and this is really where I want you to come in and give us your views on your ambitions and what you think could be done at that regional and national level. So we're developing within Transport East a wider transport strategy for the east of England over the next 6 months. It's going to propose investment priorities to government, making the case really trying to secure travel. Is going to be part of the policy mix in view of its benefits around decarbonisation and health. And what we really want to know from you is how do we bolster that case? What are your ambitions, and what can be done at a regional level? So what I was hoping to do for the next 5 or 10 minutes, similar to this morning, for those of you that were there, is to just open the floor now to comments. We've set 2 questions there, and I'd really be interested in your views on those 2 questions, or indeed any other comments that you want to make. There's 2 options here. You can either put in the chat any comments, and Nick and myself will review them and go through them. But also, please do put your hands up as well and answer directly. We had some excellent feedback this morning, and it'd be really good to get your views on those 2 questions. So what I'll do, I'll hand over to the floor now to start going through stuff. I've got Rachel to come in first. Rachel, do you want to kick off, and then hopefully others will follow you? But I'll go over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm sorry, it's going to be really boring for you and a few others, I dare say, because I've already said this point this morning and I didn't realise it was perhaps going to be slightly more relevant to this session. But I think it bears repeating that as a cyclist, and I've just cycled back from Ipswich, which is about 8 miles, and somebody I spoke to when I got back was really surprised that you could go that far on a bike. And it's actually, I know that, you know, I'm not perhaps older, but it's really not that great a distance. And if you've got the time and a lovely sunny day, it's the best therapy. It really is fantastic. I can highly recommend getting out there if you have time and you possibly can. But the thing is, not that journey particularly, but round here where we live, and I live in Woodbridge, the network of rural roads, including many small country lanes, is a nightmare for cyclists, and it's quite hair-raising at times. And I used to be a cycle trainer, so I'm quite a confident cyclist, but even I feel very intimidated at times by white van man and others, you know, driving too close, way too fast. And I totally get why lots of people don't want to cycle for any reason, whether it's a part of a commute or whether it's, you know, for leisure, because they just don't feel safe. And I'm seriously thinking of starting a national petition, actually, to get press gang, the government, to reduce the national speed limit on our rural roads. I would say 40 at the most. It's not just cyclists, it's obviously pedestrians, people trying to get across roads particularly, and horse riders as well, amongst others. It's just not conducive to active and or sustainable travel. You know, and if we are serious about the climate emergency, and I proposed a declaration that passed last year on our council for that, then, you know, we really do have to get serious about that, I believe, if we're going to get more people not only fitter and therefore happier and healthier, but also less carbon on the roads. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Rachel. And I guess, yeah, that plays to the point of that wider policy mix. And also in the gear change document that DfT published, they did talk a lot about the requirements, I guess, the quality criteria. So I'll definitely make a note of those. Conscious I've got a few other people to come in here. So I'll just go down the list I've got. John Cross, I've got you next. Do you want to come in?
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'm like Rachel, I'm going to say something I said this morning again. Quiet Lanes initiative is a great idea. I absolutely endorse what Rachel said about speed limits, but actually it's a little bit more than speed limits. You talked about a step change, a paradigm shift, whatever, in attitude, and I wonder whether, given the roads in the area I live, which is between Fram and Saxe, we can't actually have some categorisation changes where certain roads are cycling unfriendly and other roads are cycling friendly, because I am mindful that cyclists on occasions are a cause of the problem as well as a symptom of other people. I think cycle racks in towns can always be improved. They quite often were built some time ago and have been neglected in terms of suitable location and the condition that they're in. Quite often when I go shopping in Fram on a Saturday morning, I've got to use a fairly intricate means of attaching myself to a cycle rack without also attaching somebody else's bike to it. But I think also we need to think about the design of roads, because as long as you've got a soft level verge and the road is in reasonably good condition, then, as you say rightly about weather, I mean, for 9 or 10 months of the year, it's a reasonably pleasant experience. I mean, I'm up with Rachel. I don't think anything of doing a 30-40 mile trip on a bike, but the 5 miles from Great Glenham to Framlingham via a non-B road route is really quite a pleasant ride. It's a bit of a bugger on the way back because you've got a steep hill coming out of the town, and that's where e-bikes come in to help those people who don't fancy pedalling up a 1 in 4. I just wonder from your presentation whether we don't need to think beyond the funding issue and not just see this as something that we need support for, because if we can have a community-led initiative and we can find routes that are already fit for purpose, then subject to the speed limit issue, and I'm not qualified to talk about how you go about changing the speed limit on a road, maybe some signage is all that's required and lots of publicity.
Thank you, John, and I agree. Yeah, but there is actions needed here at every tier to make sure that we unlock the barriers for cycling and walking. Conscious I've got a number of people still to go. Really keen to get them in. So Andrew Cassie, I've got you next. Do you want to come in? Andrew, are you there or possibly on mute?
Hey, oh, sorry. Yep. Right. Yeah, I'd just like to say, as part of the Quiet Lanes team, picking up from the original pilot there, the response has been fantastic from across the county. Once we got the county's support by their own volition, they extended our ambition from just being in the East County, where the Greenprint Forum vote. Some of you on this call might remember that mandate to move that forward. And we've actually, it's had a really good response with currently up to 290 kilometres of extra designation across the county if they were all successful. So I think that just demonstrates the community in the rural areas. They're all behind that and get this. As much as protecting what's already there, but also there is obviously that speed element to it as well, which we're not directly tackling in the current phase of the quiet lanes. It's more to designate those that are already quiet. But I think there's much more for future phases if we can go beyond that, especially with things like the highway code changes, given the hierarchy of safety, more to the non-motorized vehicles. And we will be doing an advertising campaign, an awareness campaign aimed mainly at drivers, because there's such a prevalence now across the county, to start to get that message through. So you might be able to see that change in behaviour. And in terms of following up, in terms of using the lanes, because it's a bit disparate at the minute, although it's really good coverage if you check the map that's online, quietlanesuffolk.co.uk. I found a really good app for when I used to travel in London that takes you on those, not the main streets, but some of the back streets that run parallel you might not know about. So again, if the technology can be used to assist to stitch together these kind of networks for those that aren't fully aware of those alternatives.
Excellent, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, I think what we're saying here is that users need to have a variety of barriers broken down for them, that know where they're going, that they're feeling safety for all of this to come together. Conscious I've got 3 more people, Graham, Sue and John, to come in. Graham, I'll go with you first. Do you want to come in, please?
Yes, please, Andrew. A couple of things really I wanted to say. Am I ambitious for this? Of course I am. I wouldn't be in this conference if I wasn't. And for those who mentioned age-related issues, I'm 73 and I can do Felixstowe to Ipswich with no real problem, and back without using the train. So there's lots of scope for those who are younger and possibly even older. I just wondered, Andrew, are we best off really focusing our efforts on trying to improve the use of cycling for commuting and shopping kind of daily activities, sort of try and create a Cambridge type scenario, or is it more on the leisure front bearing in mind that, lots of people from Europe come across this country, very happy to cycle around, find our facilities a bit primitive, but we could create, in conjunction with a sort of a bigger area really where we could do that. And I've got ideas for that, which I shall be putting in the East Suffolk consultation. The other thing I wanted to mention was, are we making enough noise about the kind of work that's been done? I think it's is it London Borough of Walthamstow, Royal Borough of Kingston upon Thames? I know they are two big schemes where there's been a lot of local authority activity. I do know something about Royal Borough of Kingston upon Thames because I was brought up not far from there. And if you can do it in an area like that, which is pretty traffic intensive and pretty congested, we're not going to be starting to build cycle lanes alongside main roads and things like that in Kingston upon Thames. Are there lessons we can take out of their book, basically?
Thanks, Graham. Some great points there. Yeah, you're referring to the Mini Holland projects that were in London. So there were 3 projects there, £30 million each went into Waltham Forest, Enfield and Kingston upon Thames. And the results from those are starting to be quite impressive in terms of the mode shift that they achieve. So there's definitely something in that. The DfT are advocating the rollout of that across the country. I think there's 12 Mini Hollands up for grabs in their funding, so it's something that people might want to start considering. So thanks, great points there, Graham. We'll definitely capture those. 2 more to come in. I've got Sue and then John. So Sue first, please.
Oh, hi there. I'm at the other end of East Suffolk on North Lowestoft, and lots of people in North Lowestoft do commute to Yarmouth or Galston quite regularly, but there's no cycling provision in East Suffolk or Suffolk. There is a cycle path once you hit Hopton, but it's very poor conditions, and I think that something ought to be done about it. And it's very disappointing that recently Suffolk County Council have given funding to cycling initiatives in the rest of the county, but here in Lowestoft we are again the poor relations. So
okay, thanks, Sue. I think colleagues from Suffolk are coming on later on, so hopefully they can provide some reassurance there. And we've got John, the final hand up that I've got. John, do you want to go ahead, please?
Thank you, Andrew. Reinforcing what other people have said, a lot of it. I'm the same age as Graham, and I do cycle quite often at 8 miles away for my lunch. But I think I live in Saxmundham and I live in the high street, so I can get to places. But if we want to encourage people to use bikes as a means of transport, then it needs to be safe to get wherever people want to go. And I can think of examples within 2 miles of the high street here where people the A12. So you've no choice but to cycle down the A12 if you want to go from anywhere to and from your own house. And it's all very well having a quiet lane somewhere, but if it doesn't go where you want to go, there isn't a great deal of help. That would be my main comment, I think. Thanks very much.
Thanks, John. Yeah, absolutely right. And that goes back to, I guess, sort of Rachel's point at the start and then other themes that have come through. Safety or perception of safety seems to be and remains, the #1 barrier to people cycling. It is something that needs to be tackled at policy level. Okay, that's all the hands up I had. We've got quite a lot of comments that are coming through. Just check the hands up. There might have been one more there. No. Okay. A lot of comments coming through on the chat as well, so many thanks for that. Quite a few are sort of talking about ways in which we can pedestrianise high streets, using some of the schemes that have been delivered elsewhere in Scandinavia, some of the ones in London as well. Also talking about electric bikes as well, which is a bit of a theme coming through. What we'll do is we'll take a note of all of those and make sure they're captured in the work after this. So that wraps up this sort of initial introductory session. Many thanks for your comments. It's got the debate going. Nick, I'll hand back to you to introduce colleagues from Suffolk and keep the interaction going. So thanks a lot.
Thanks very much, Andrew. That was a great session, and thanks everyone for comments on the chat board, which as Andrew said, we will be taking note of, so be reassured on that. And for the comments made during the session, some really, really good points. Right, so we're moving to the next presentation, which is by our colleagues at Suffolk County Council and also East Suffolk Council, and it's all around making travel more active and sustainable. So can I welcome Carl Ashton, Paul Horn from the County Council, and Anthony Taylor and Jason Beck from this council. If you'd like to take the virtual floor, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul, for sharing that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Carl Ashton. I work at Suffolk County Council in the Transport Policy team. My role is to mainly lead on the County Council's walking and cycling infrastructure. So I've been very heavily involved in the Emergency Active Travel Fund that's recently been spent. This afternoon, we're going to talk to you, me and myself, and my colleague Paul Horn, who's a part of my team. We're going to talk to you about building on what Andrew spoke at a regional level to start to bring in the context for Suffolk, and hopefully then start to tease out some of the questions that were raised in Andrew's presentation there. It's quite interesting to see some of those comments, and hopefully you'll start to see some of the answers develop as me and Paul do our talk now. Paul, can you just move on to the next slide, please? So there's three parts to our presentation. I'm going to lead on the first two bits, and Andrew introduced gear change. I'm going to talk a little bit more about gear change and what some of the detail of gear change has got included in it, and start to think about how that may impact on Suffolk and how we may have to think differently about some of the things that we currently do and how we currently spend our highways budgets in order to meet and understand the requirements of gear change. And then I'm going to hand over to Paul, who's going to talk about some of the Emergency Active Travel Fund things that we've done in Suffolk over the last sort of 4 or 5 months, and also talk about some of the other interventions that could be at our disposal to implement in the future, such as school streets and the like. Paul, could you move on to next slide, please? Thank you. So Andrew spoke earlier about gear change. It was a document that was issued by the government at the end of July, and it's came about because mainly or driven by the pandemic. When we went into lockdown, if you recall, it was the beginning of spring and the weather was lovely, and our only time to leave our houses was for exercise, and there was a dramatic increase in the number of people walking and cycling. And government recognised this, and alongside the declaration of the climate emergencies, really wanted to act to try and lock in some of those benefits of people walking and cycling more. Just out of interest, over the summer, we monitor data from Strava, and we've seen a 162% increase in cycling across Suffolk over the summer. That 162% is compared to the whole of 2019's data. So we know there's been a dramatic increase in cycling, particularly in Suffolk. So we're really keen to capture those benefits moving forward. I spoke about climate emergency. Obviously, we've said earlier that one of the largest pollutants is transport, and a large proportion of trips taken in Suffolk are short journeys taken by private vehicles. And I think we recognise as an authority that some of those journeys do need to be taken by motorised vehicles. Those people that are vulnerable or got disabilities. But what we're saying is there are a lot of people out there that take those journeys by private vehicle when actually there are potential alternatives that could be used. So, Paul, could you move on to slide 4, please? So these two documents were the ones that were released. The second document there, the cycling infrastructure design, that's a document that sits alongside gear change. And that's more for us technical boffins who have to then work out exactly what it is on the ground that we have to install. There's a lot of information in that document. It's 180 odd pages long. It's got lots of good examples of the things that the Department of Transport are looking for local authorities to implement. There's also design criteria in there about sort of widths available that we should provide for walking and cycling. But one of the key things within the gear change document is this issue that they now want to see cycles treated equally to motor vehicles, and that is quite a change to get our heads around. Before, and if we're brutally honest, most of our highway network is looked upon as a road. Oh, and by the way, if we can squeeze a path in, brilliant, and if we can squeeze a path and a cycle lane, even better. And I think the tone of the document, particularly with gear change, is very, very different. And it puts a real emphasis on us as local authorities to think very differently about our highway network and how we manage it in the future. So within the gear change document, there are a number of key themes they've identified. They talk about creating better streets and empowering local authorities and protecting people and making people safer, so that makes them allow them to use walking and cycling as their preferred method of transport. And one of the things that we spoke earlier about, those connectivities and making those connections locally. And I think one of the somebody mentioned about having to cycle along the A road or very busy B roads. Is one of the things that we would like to try and start to establish and look at in more detail is what are the opportunities for creating more rural links on our existing public rights of way network, because we've identified that some of them are only footpath status, but some of them are already bridleway status. And I don't think they're particularly well known across the county that actually a bridleway you can cycle on. But equally, if there are footways that we think we can easily convert to bridleways, then we should consider doing that, because ultimately they are completely segregated from vehicles. They're often in areas that are fairly rural and have got a lot of greenery and actually really pleasant to cycle along. Paul, do you want to move on to the next slide, please? So yeah, this is a quote to give you an example of the tone that the government are taking with gear change. So the quality of cycling infrastructure must sharply improve. Proper protected bike lanes, safe cycle junctions, interventions for low traffic streets encourage people to cycle. And really what I'm trying to reiterate here is the tone. You know, in the past, these types of documents that may have been issued to highway authorities would talk about things like thou shalt try to, thou shalt attempt to, whereas the tone of this document is very different. You know, must sharply improve. They talk about bicycles being seen as equal to cars in design terms. And if I can move on to the next slide, there is a set of key design principles that the document issues. And I appreciate you might not be able to see that very clearly on your screens, but it talks about cyclists must be segregated from pedestrians. Cyclists must be treated as vehicles, not pedestrians. You know, purely cosmetic changes should be avoided. So there's a real change in tone, and within the county, that's I wouldn't say hairs running, but it's made us really sit back and think about our highway network, and think about A, how we do things at the moment, but B, how we may need to change and adapt our network going forward. And the sort of things I'm thinking about here are things like how we currently allocate our maintenance funding is a good example. So at the moment, in maintenance terms, we define them as the road or the footway. So technically speaking, we don't currently have a budget to maintain cycleways, because the cycleway is either A, part of the road in some instances, or B, part of the footway. And I think the emphasis from government is that we should be allocating appropriate funds just to maintain our cycle infrastructure. So it certainly made us sit up and take note. And I think there's lots of other local authorities across the county, across the country, sorry, that are in a very similar position to us. Could you move on to the next slide, please? So I just wanted to pick up on one of the key elements of gear change. We were fortunate enough to have a discussion with the Department of Transport at the beginning of September. And so I wanted to highlight here the terminology that they referred to as creating this Active Travel England organisation, similar to an Ofsted. So what they're anticipating to do, and the timescales of these are not clear at the moment, is to set up this organisation that will come in and effectively assess each highway authority with regards to their intent and delivery of active travel measures. There will then be effectively a league table produced nationally, that will start to rank highway authorities against each other as to how seriously they're taking active travel, and that is quite a step change for us, and it also has quite big implications. So they talk in gear change about that affecting then the potential for us to draw in future funding for both active travel schemes, but also other highway schemes. So any piece of work that we may consider doing on the highway in the future may well be influenced by our ranking as an active travel authority. So I'll move on to the next slide, please. So now I'm going to have a quick run through of the impact on Suffolk. Can you move on to the next slide? So at the start of lockdown, or early on it seemed like the start of lockdown, but it was actually probably May or June, the government, as part of this £2 billion that Andrew was speaking about earlier, top sliced some of it off as an emergency active travel fund. And Suffolk Council were allocated 337,000 in our original allocation from the Department for Transport. We had to bid to that fund, and fortunately enough, we were actually allocated 112% of our allocation. So whilst our allocation was 337, we actually received 376,000, and that was down to our strong and ambitious bid. So we're really pleased that we feel like we got a good sense of what the government are trying to achieve, and some of the measures that we proposed in our bid aligned well with some of the objectives that they're trying to deliver. Now, you may well be aware of some of the schemes that we have delivered, and I'm sure Paul's going to go through those in a little bit more detail shortly. I think one of the biggest challenges we've had with delivering these schemes is the timeframes the government have asked us to deliver them in. And if you are aware of any of the ones in East Suffolk, particularly around Felixstowe or Beccles, which have been interesting to say the least, we've had to work at speed in a way that we've not worked in before. So historically, these types of highway active travel schemes would be designed up, there'd be full public consultations up front, we'd get to hear what people's views were, tweak and change things accordingly, whereas in this particular instance, the government have asked us to implement these things at pace. And so what we've found we've had to do is implement a lot of these measures as temporary measures or experimental measures, of which when they get installed, they then become the trials, which we then seek people's comments and views on, to then inform us as to whether we want to continue or extend or make permanent that trial or alter, change or remove that trial. And that's been a massive challenge for us within Suffolk. Do you want to just move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. And then as part of that, there's the second tranche of funding that DFT have announced. That's a slightly bigger pot of money. And at the moment, we've been allocated 1.34 million. We had to submit a bid against which projects we wanted to spend that money on, and we did that back in August, on the 7th of August. The DFT did say to us they'd get back to us very quickly with a response so that we could get on, because one of the criteria within that allocation was that all schemes had to be delivered by the end of this financial year. As I sit here talking to you today, I'm yet to receive any confirmation from DFT of any funding. So at the moment, we're sitting in a situation where we've potentially got a relatively large sum of money to spend on active travel in Suffolk in 4 months. Clearly, I'm expecting some change from the DFT on this and some relaxation. Otherwise, we're going to be in a similar situation as we were earlier in the summer, trying to deliver huge amounts of infrastructure and changes without really being able to consult up front. Because what we would like to do, particularly on the second phase, is to talk to communities up front, show them the schemes we want to deliver, hear what their views are, and if necessary, make alterations and changes before we implement anything. Have we got one more slide? Is that my last slide? So I think that was my last slide. Paul, I'm going to hand over to you now so you can talk a little bit about some of the interventions we've done in Suffolk and perhaps elaborate a bit further on how they've gone.
Thank you, Carl, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to run through some of the schemes, as Carl said. We've only got a few minutes, unfortunately, so that'll be a quick whistle-stop tour of some of the schemes. It's a variety of shapes and sizes and their sort of impact on people as well. So some of them are physical interventions, some of them are more softer measures, winning the hearts and minds, making things just easier and safer. So the first one, starting off with low traffic neighbourhoods, which is one of the more topical ones at the moment. As Carl mentioned, it's one of those we've put in Ipswich in place, and in fact, what you do is quite a relatively low-cost scheme. You put planters in the road, and all of a sudden you've got no longer a through traffic road, you've got two cul-de-sacs in effect. Everyone can still get to their homes and houses and businesses, but you can't drive length of the road. And as a result of that, the roads become much quieter and more easy to use for cycling and walking. So that's one of the more obvious ones to do and has been tried. And as Carl said, it's a trial at the moment in Ipswich. It's being seen how it's going. So that's low traffic neighbourhoods, also known as filter mobility and with other names like mini Hollands as well. And as we discussed already, thanks to Andrew Cassie in the discussion, is the Quiet Lanes project. Some funding's been put aside, £235,000 has been put aside by Suffolk County Council to produce more cycle quiet lanes. And there's a process at the moment going ahead where people can submit their requests for lanes to be made into quiet lanes. Because it's very important in rural communities, as we've heard already about the issues with 60-mile-an-hour traffic. As you're trying to walk or cycle or even horse ride along these quiet lanes. So that one is obviously progressing at the moment. There's a lot of interest in it, a lot of requests for quiet lanes, and my colleagues are actually working through the prioritisation and picking out which lanes would be selected in the future to be progressed with that money available. Another of the schemes at the moment for the Emergency Travel Fund are protected cycle lanes. This is an example in Ipswich. They're called traffic wands, and they're basically plastic bollards put in the road along mandatory cycle lanes to ensure that cars don't stray into the cycle area. It not only provides a bit more visibility of a cycling route, it also helps the cyclist feel a bit more protected. And as we've said already, it's a trial to see how it works out. And potentially, if it does work out well, it could be a chance in the future to make these lanes permanent cycle lanes with concrete curbs, and as you get in London, a bit more solid. But this is a starting point, see how it works out. And obviously the drivers have to get used to it, the cyclists have to get used to it. But it does provide encouragement for those who are less confident cyclists or those who are more newcomers to cycling who want to have a go on what is quite a busy road. This one here is 40-mile-an-hour speed limit in town. Cars do go quite fast and sometimes speed, and you are left potentially feeling vulnerable if you're not a confident cyclist or not used to the situation. So that's another of the options we've got available to us. The other thing which Carl's also mentioned is about the public rights of way. This is an example in Felixstowe on Orwell Green behind Morrison's, if anyone knows the area. It was a muddy track, for want of a better word, not designed, not available for cycling officially, but obviously was used by cyclists. And it's now been upgraded. It's given a sealed surface, nice tarmac surface, opened up for cycling officially. And all of a sudden you've got a nice route through, and it's available 12 months of the year, whereas previously in the winter, it got very muddy, very unpleasant. A lot of the more elderly residents who want to walk to the supermarket or the health centre there had problems walking on a muddy path. You've now got a nice route. This is an example of what you can do. Obviously, there's masses of rights of way throughout Suffolk, and these are potentially options to be looked at in terms of making connectivity between villages and towns while avoiding having to use the busy trafficked roads. The next two are interventions around reducing car domination of our streets. So Play Streets has been operated in a few places around the country already. It's an opportunity where local communities can get together and decide they want to close their road for a Sunday afternoon or whatever, and let people start using the road for other things than cars. This is an example, I think, from London, but obviously it's not a big deal in terms of it getting it achieved. There are processes in place now where people can request it, but it's a community initiative, basically. People say they want to have their road made available, have an event in the street, have the kids playing on the road, practicing cycling, walking, scooting, etc. So that's an option which is available, and it doesn't need to be led by the community level, but it makes sense to have everyone in the street agreeing to the idea and people coming together, and not at the moment, obviously, with the pandemic, but in the future, having the chance to come together, meet each other without the hassle of cars parked on the road or driving up and down the road, sort of segregating the area. And something similar, but obviously different, is the school streets. This is an initiative where they've found out that obviously the air quality outside schools has been a big talking point, and trying to get people to drop their kids off at school, not drop their kids off at school by car, but cycle and walk to school, or kids to cycle or walk to school themselves. One of the issues is outside the schools, it's packed with traffic, people dropping people off. It's not a great situation. So a relatively cheap solution is to provide a gateway, in effect, a block through the start of school day and end of school day, operated locally by the school or local community. And as again, it's a community initiative in effect and a school initiative, but it doesn't mean that children can go to school without having to worry about car traffic outside their school. So that's the safety as well. Another thing, as mentioned, is getting people confident in cycling and walking. And for people who are new to cycling or haven't done a lot of cycling, there's cycle training available. So there's got a picture here of school children being given some bikeability lessons, but it's available for adults as well and families to go together. And repairs for bikes. So if you've got a bike in the shed you haven't used some time, trying to get repaired, you may not have to do that. There are repair options. There's doctor bike services. There's a Cycling UK scheme at the moment we're helping with in Ipswich, where every Tuesday afternoon a bike doctor turns up. Is available to just come along and get the bike looked at, basic checks of the brakes, gears, punches, etc., and get the bike sorted out and back on the road, which is another step forward. And then there's Love to Ride, which is this is Love to Ride Suffolk, available online, free of charge, and it's a means of encouraging people to get into. They've got loads of different resources on there. They've also got sort of not competitions exactly, but chances where people can take part in cycling activities, challenging themselves or their colleagues at work or in other communities, and just get out there and cycle and record the fact they're doing it, and be encouraged by Love to Ride with emails coming to them and explaining what's going on, what's the latest initiative, a few little incentive prizes coming out as well. It's a cheap, free for the public service, just to encourage people to get out and think about cycling and share their experiences. And then a more national initiative, which I noticed recently, a person called Dan Raven Ellison, who's a geographer and creative explorer, as he calls himself, has recognised the fact, which probably we've all known but not actually made a big deal about, is that there are loads of public rights of way across the country, collecting villages and towns, and we don't actually have a real clear picture of how they work. So you're looking to get he's got this website set up, and looking for local people to look together to combine these routes and see how they fit together and see where the issues are, if there's a gap, if there's something that needs tidying up. And it's basically a mission to have a map of England showing all the routes, off-road routes between villages and towns, which is a great idea, and everyone can get involved in that one as well. And at the County Council, we've also got the Community Self-Help Scheme, which is made available to parishes and town councils just to help them work on low-grade initiatives for maintenance, in effect. So it's basically things like if you've got signage which needs improving, if you've got a bridle way which is a bit overgrown, the idea is that you can set up a little local self-help group and go out and work on fixing those issues. Obviously, the County Council provides a bit of training and a bit of advice as well. So it helps yourself, just get involved, looking at initiatives to help cycling and walking in their area. And one of my favourites, which is the local initiative, is the Bury St Edmunds Rickshaw. A simple idea, really. It's basically a rickshaw bike, which has been used for taking those who are unable to travel around that much at the moment, going to care homes, etc., taking people out, taking them out to see the sights in Bury, cycling around, having a chat. It helps them. It also shows people cycling around Bury in a rickshaw, in effect, which is a nice idea. And at the moment, also, they're diversifying and helping with lockdown deliveries. So it's another service which they're providing. That's not it's expensive, but not massively expensive initiative. Once it's out there, it's available for everyone to enjoy and share, which is great. And then one of my final thoughts is another local initiative. It's the consideration of what's called a cargo bike library. There's no reason why a local parish, town council couldn't buy themselves a cargo bike and then share it out. So people can take the bike on a loan basis, take it out for the day or a few hours or whatever to go shopping, go to the allotment and just use that bike. Obviously, rather than having to store it themselves and look after it, it could be a locally available community initiative, which would be a great idea. So as I said, that is a very, very quick run through of, I think there's about 12 different ideas. There are other ideas out there. There's more information available, of course, but that's my list for listening. And also, here's a couple of websites, the Active Travel News, which is what Carl's mentioned about the Emergency Travel Fund. That's on that first website. And as Andrew's already mentioned, the Quiet Lanes website contains more information about the Quiet Lanes and how to request more information. So I shall hand you over to Anthony from East Suffolk for the next section.
Lovely, many thanks, Paul and Carl, for that presentation. If I can just ask Jason to get that great presentation up. So yes, myself and Jason are planning officers in the planning policy and delivery team at East Suffolk Council. And we're going to talk to you about, as you can see there, the East Suffolk cycling and walking strategy, which we're at a relatively early stage in the process at. And I will just say one thing about how this project has come to be. In 2016, Waveney District Council, as it was then, adopted a cycle strategy for the Waveney area. And this included a lot of good work. But in 2019, Waveney District Council and Suffolk Coastal District Council became East Suffolk Council, as we are now. And our ambition with that cycle strategy is to expand it across the whole of East Suffolk, covering the former Suffolk coastal area, to include cycling and also walking issues. And as you can see on the screen there, we've got 4 project outcomes that we want to implement through this cycling and walking strategy. And as you can, if you glance your eyes over that, there's a lot of mapping based initiatives, and we really want it to be a visual tool. We don't want it to become something that an awful lot of planning documents can become, which is rather lengthy and rather heavy on the text. And we think that this project will really benefit from a very highly visual approach. And so first, starting off with the first bullet point there, we want to identify key corridors within East Suffolk where there are going to be significant benefits from improving cycling and walking connections between settlements, and we'll base that on a good evidence base using Strava data, travel to work patterns, key destinations within settlements and between settlements, as well as Jason will talk to you a little bit later, the consultation that we're running today and any submissions made to that. Now, the second bullet point on there is the cycling and walking suitability maps. We want to produce suitability maps for the major centres, the market towns, and some of the more sustainable large villages in East Suffolk, and those designations, the settlement types in quotes there, are identified in our local plans. And what these suitability maps will do is they will assess the quality of a route within these settlements for cycling and walking. And then, having got those maps produced, we'll be able to see where there are the gaps, or where there are the areas of poor quality or mediocre quality, and look to make improvements to join up good cycling and walking connections throughout settlements. And the third bullet point on there, cycling and walking infrastructure improvement opportunities. This links very much to what Jason will talk to you in a second about the current consultation that we're doing about offering the communities of East Suffolk the opportunity to propose potential solutions to achieve improvements in cycling and walking across East Suffolk. And that could range from marking up new cycle lanes, which is not ideal, but constraints may dictate that is the only possible solution. But that could go all the way up to cycling and walking routes segregated from vehicle traffic. And the final point on there is an implementation map. And the reason why we've included that in the strategy is, well, first of all, we think it's a good idea, but second of all, we think that the Waveney cycle strategy, and although it contained a lot of really good information, an awful lot of it hasn't yet been implemented. And so we want to make sure that the implementation of the walking and cycling strategy for East Suffolk is implemented, and we can monitor that on a regular basis, and we can earmark how and when certain solutions have been implemented and via what means, whether that be SIL, district or neighbourhood SIL, whether that be through a planning application on a development site allocation within the Suffolk Coastal or Waveney local plans, whether that be a Suffolk County Council funding pot from national government, or any other means. And something key to mention at this stage is those are the 4 outcomes we want to produce. But the reason why we want to produce this now is because there has been, you know, an incredible impetus, as the other presenters have mentioned, to focus on cycling and walking improvements, particularly in our urban areas where the quality for cycling and walking is very low. And I will just pass now on to Jason, who will talk to you a little bit more about the current state of work we are at now.
Hello everyone, and thanks Anthony. Yeah, I just want to sort of run through the consultation that we're currently undertaking, and just so that everyone here knows how to get involved and how we're going about things. The consultation started on the 19th of October. It runs through to the 30th of November, so there's still plenty of time in which to get involved. We've tried to make it as visual as possible, as easy to use, and to make it you know, as user-friendly as it possibly can be. This is in line with current government sort of thinking, with a white paper that came out recently about digitisation. And so what we're trying to do is build on that and create a website such as this. When you click on it, first of all, you'll be presented with a splash page sort of explaining what the strategy is. It also contains a link to the highways reporting tool for more the sort of maintenance issues as opposed to suggested improvements. If you click on that, you'll see a map of the district or the council area. Now, all those little red dots are separate points that people have made already. Now, this is a useful tool for other people to use as well as ourselves, and you can click on each of these individual dots and you can see exactly what somebody has said. So in this instance, somebody's requested a removal of a railings, which they see as causing an obstruction. Now, it's very early days yet. We're not quite halfway through the consultation, but we've had a very good uptake in people wanting to make comments on this. And you can already see certain patterns emerging, certain clusters of people. And also, interestingly, you can also see certain routes emerging, particularly to the south, where you're getting lines of red points forming up towards major settlements. So very early days, you are seeing some interesting patterns emerging. That said, obviously it could change going forwards. On the right hand side, you've got the ability to submit a comment. You've also got the ability to click on to a link through to Suffolk County's website, where you can see all the different public rights of way that are out there, their status, and any sort of gaps that might exist in the network. On top of that, just to aid people as they're putting comments in, we've also put all the allocations currently within the local plans within this map. That will give people an idea where the growth and where the additional sort of people movements are likely to be occurring going forwards. And what it also does is it shows where there may be potential opportunities as well for improvement. If you click on the little icon on the right hand side, if that loads up, yeah, you can then precisely map where it is that you wish to put the issue, and you can also provide what you think the issue is. The next bit is you can provide a solution as well. This isn't mandatory. Obviously, we will, with relevant experts, we will be look to find the best possible solution we can to the issue. But it may well be that people have an idea already, and they may want to provide that idea to us. So they've got the opportunity to do that. They've also got the opportunity to submit a photo. And you can see from the map, I'll just sort of zoom in as well, it can be fairly accurate. You can go right down into a very sort of small geographical location to pick where you want the issue to be. You can also, though, explain further in the text. If the point isn't properly or isn't accurately located, you can then add a bit more detail just to help us along. So hopefully that will give you a sort of a whistle-stop tour of the consultation that we're currently undertaking. As I say, it's been fairly good uptake so far, and we're keen for as many people to comment as they possibly can. People involved in this meeting and obviously people who watch it later on YouTube. We have been doing sort of presentations to different groups. The time for the consultation, there's still a little bit of time there, and if different groups such as community partnerships want us to speak to them and present to them, we're happy to do so. So yeah, hopefully that gives you an idea of a whistle-stop tour, and I will try and exit this and give that back to the presenter.
Thank you all. I think the presentations have been completed, unless someone tells me otherwise. So really well done all. That was brilliant. Really visual, great presentations. And the comments boxes on the side are on fire in a good way, which is brilliant, which means we've provoked a lot of thought and comment and discussion. I think lots of ideas coming forward, which is exactly what this is all about. But I'm going to stop talking because I want to hear from everyone around the virtual table. Let me just check who's raised their hand and we'll bring them in. Right, okay, let's start with Sue Barnard. Any comments or questions around what you've heard, proposals even? Sue, you may be on mute if you're trying to talk.
Thank you. I was most interested in lots of things. I think my hand is still left up from last time. I think if there were a better cycling strategy and it had the idea of keeping pedestrians and traffic away from bikes, that would be absolutely wonderful. And here in Lowestoft, we need more cycle racks. We need better cycle route provision. And if you could move that forward, that would be absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sue. That's noted. Graham, can I bring you in, please?
Thank you very much, Nick. Yes, it really goes back to Carl's presentation, and you're making this point about in gear change. It's kind of you must do this, and giving some sort of design principles around that. I just wondered whether you feel that we should try. Are we trying to sort of provide segregation on every most convenient route? Or would it actually be better to try and isolate some routes which we could actually cut off in the middle somewhere so that it actually completely removes through traffic, therefore making it much safer for cyclists? Because we kind of, we look at the Valley Road, that is first class, but I just wonder whether that overcomes the fear people have of being alongside such a busy road and quite a fast moving road at that. And the second point I wanted to make was to Andrew Taylor. Yeah, the absolute ideal place to sort of do some of this stuff will be when you develop the North Felixstowe garden development, because I think East Suffolk Council is in the privileged position of actually owning most of the land. So surely you can say what should happen, and you know we've really got to provide good links from that development into Felixstowe Town Centre and to and from the proposed leisure centre. I know I keep banging on about this. I know Nick's heard me say it before, but you know, there's precious little cycle infrastructure up there at the moment, and with a little bit of careful design, I'm sure that development could be delivered with a pretty good network of existing paths made up and new paths through the development, which would mean people would naturally be happy to cycle into town to do the work they needed to do, or indeed catch the train from Felixstowe Station. Thank you.
Do you want me to try and answer that for Councillor Newman? I'll try and answer the first bit, Councillor Newman.
Yes, please. I mean, we've talked about this, haven't we, Carl, with underground maps?
We have talked a lot about it. So I think there's a number of things you've touched on, and I could probably spend another hour or so speaking about, but I don't think we've got that long. Is that the stuff on Valley Road is around trying to provide additional protection to what's already there. In a perfect world, i.e. when new development comes along, we really should be taking the opportunity to build fully segregated routes. And wherever possible now, I think our preference is to have fully segregated routes, but that does have implications of its own, particularly in a lot of market towns. When you start to get into the urban areas in East Suffolk where roads are narrow, that's going to leave us with some really difficult decisions to make about the use of motorised traffic in those roads. But I think as a county council, we recognise that there's a difficult balance to be struck between the gear change document and the technical guidance that came with it. It's very much written around urban environments. There's not a lot in there about how to deal with urban rural environments, and even less in there about how to deal with rural environments. And we do recognise that within Suffolk, a lot of our nature is rural, and so people do use their motorised vehicles to come into town. But we are going to be left with some really difficult decisions in those urban areas about decisions to be made about, do we block some roads to motorised traffic so that cyclists have, you know, a right of way? Do we narrow the roads right down and make them one way so that we can fit these protected routes in? And obviously all of that comes at a huge expense. So I don't think I can answer probably any more than that. And then we've got to try and find a way to balance this all out as we move forward.
Thanks for your comments, Graham, on the north of Lowestoft Garden Village. I think you're absolutely right that could seriously benefit from some significant improvements and help deliver some significant improvements for cycling and walking in that area. And you may be aware that the policy in the local plan includes a requirement for the applicant to produce a master plan before anything else takes shape. And as part of that master plan, no doubt cycling and walking will play an important part. One of the with the East Suffolk cycling and walking strategy is to assess the routes in and around all of the site allocations within both the Suffolk Coastal and the Waveney local plan. And so we can feed into that production of that master plan anything that comes to us from an officer point of view, from what we identify, but also what members of the community identified through the consultation, which is currently running at the moment. So I would say to anyone listening today, if you do have any thoughts or suggestions, or simply that you know of an issue in an area, that you submit it to us through that consultation, and we can go away and look at it and assess it and hopefully deliver it.
Thank you all. If I can bring in Rachel Smith-Light. Rachel.
Thank you. Carl, I've got a quick question, and I feel sorry for you guys, by the way, because you spent quite a lot of time, it seems to me, and you know, not wrongly by any means, putting in shared walking and cycling pavements and spaces, and now it sounds like from the latest government advice you're going to have to totally like do an about turn on all of that, so it's really frustrating for you. I wanted to know, and I'm sorry if you said this and I didn't pick up on it, what the phase 2 that you talk about, because you know I was too late with trying to get in something for phase 1. What is the deadline if my ward community wants to apply for some potential support with putting in a bid for some of that money for measures there?
To just answer the first point about shared use, yes, it is equally as frustrating for us as probably as for everybody else. But that is interesting because that sort of touches on what Councillor Newman was saying previously about we are restricted by the width of highway we have available. And I think that the government guidance we've got, it suggests that everything should be protected, but it doesn't completely close the door on it being shared. If the number of cyclists is low and the pedestrians are low, that still can be shared. But the preference is always now to go for segregated. So that's that question sort of partly answered. In terms of the funding, we've made our application to the DFT at the beginning of August. I would say there's probably some flexibility within that, and until we get confirmation from the department exactly what our allocation is, we can't really confirm in the public domain what the projects are. So we've put a wish list in, and then once we get confirmation on the funding, we can then mix and match to hopefully we'll get all the funding we've asked for and be able to do everything. So I can't quite confirm yet whether any of the projects that you'd like to put forward are in or not, but there is some flexibility within the fund. And I know within tranche 1, we've done odd things that have come forward that perhaps weren't in our original bid. We have got some flexibility. So if you have got something you feel that would be useful as a temporary measure, and I must stress that these are temporary measures at this moment, something we want to try, then please let me know.
Okay, thanks, Carl. I had, sorry, just one other thing. I think we need to think bigger, you know, not, and I think this has been touched on in the chat, not really just what I've mentioned already about safety and all the other brilliant things people have said, but also bikes are expensive, and they are prohibitively expensive for some people, for many people. And actually, you don't have to have a brand new bike. And sometimes a second-hand bike is actually better quality and much easier to ride because it's a better bike, Apollo or something from Halfords. But the thing is, you know, if you don't know anything about bikes, it's a bit tricky, and a lot of people are not aware that there is such a thing as a frame size. And if you get the wrong frame size, it makes your bike and your journey really uncomfortable, and it will put people off using it. I've had that. I've learned from bitter experience myself. So I know that, I don't know if there still is, but there was a really good project in Holywells Park in Ipswich. I think they had people with special needs, like doing up second-hand bikes with guidance, and then they were selling them on cheap to the public. Things like that are really brilliant. You know, we need more of those. And I think Peter Byatt actually said something about having solar panels on cycle shelters, and that is so true. You know, it's like the Heineken advert, you know, what a refreshing change when everybody all mucks in and does the same thing to the same project at the same time, rather than piecemeal, adding things later as an afterthought. And I think, yeah, we need to think about that, and we need to have places for, you know, shelters where possible. I know this is all money, by the way, but we still have to aim high. But, you know, have lots of lockable places for bikes. Otherwise, people won't feel confident about using them and then having to leave them somewhere, even with a half decent lock. So, yeah, I just wanted to throw all that into the mix, really, that I think it's essential that we get people on bikes, or on the right bikes for them, that's affordable. Thanks.
Thank you very much for those comments, Rachel. Nick Cork.
Thanks, Nick. Fascinating debate this afternoon, and I will be the first to admit I'm not a cyclist, but we do in Framlingham have 2 rickshaws, as you've shown in Bury, and Stonemarket they've got them as well. But it is one of those things. They are, because obviously they're 2-seaters. One of the things I've noticed, because I do actually pedal that, probably because it's got an electric motor, but the reality of it all is the fact that I've noticed, and perhaps it's me, but there's an awful lot more lorries going through the town at the moment. Now, whether it's just because they're using shortcuts, well, you know, that does become a bit scary. And I can imagine if you're a cyclist, having a lot more transport and lorries going through towns is something that perhaps also would help the situation, because people don't feel quite so scared. And the other thing that I was concerned about is obviously where you've got someone like Framlingham, which is, you know, it's quite tight. Obviously, new developments do have cycleways and bits and pieces through them. I wasn't sure, is it possible to, God forbid, have to do compulsory purchase bits of land or strips of land to try and help, you know, put these projects and paths in? But fascinating debate. Thank you.
Would anyone like to take that particular question?
In terms of the Framlingham points, yeah, we completely agree that Framlingham does. It's a very historic town, obviously, and does have very narrow streets. I know there are a number of allocations in the Framlingham neighbourhood plan that a number of policies in the Framlingham neighbourhood plan that do really encourage cycling and walking, and seek for developments to really deliver on cycling and walking. So hopefully through those allocations that the Framlingham neighbourhood plan has sought to implement, or sought to designate through policies, there will be some cycling and walking improvements.
Can I just add, Nick, on the HGV issue, there's an HGV consultation, I gather, taking place next year. So the parishes and town councils will be asked questions about what the problems are. If anyone's got any issues at the moment, they can feed them through to the town and parish councils. That can be fed through into the actual formal consultation next year.
That's great. Thank you for that, Paul. Graham, was that an old hand, Graham, or did you want to come back with something? Sorry, just on mute, Graham. I presume that's an old hand. Right, so I don't see any other indications, but just from the chair's sort of prerogative, really, privilege, if you like. Interesting point you made earlier, Paul, about public rights of way. I think we're quite blessed in this area as a predominantly rural area with lots of public rights of way, be they footpaths, bridleways, various designations. As a cyclist myself, better declare an interest, sort of both off-road and on-road. I do use the bridleways a lot, but you do really need to know where you're going, or use some local knowledge. Just wonder if, you know, in this modern age of apps and satellite navigation, is there any potential to map routes? So if I do a Google map and want to get to a certain place, that, you know, we can use the bridleway network to get there. because I know for a fact that I can do lots of my journeys off road if I know where I'm going.
There are certainly apps out there that exist and are available, commercially available. I don't think we're, as a county council, in position to actually sort of create our own app, because that would be probably duplicating work which has already been done in a better way, to be honest. We're not experts in writing apps. The cycle maps we are producing at the moment, the paper-based PDF maps, provide indications of the walking and cycling routes around the towns. So the 12 biggest towns in Suffolk are being updated at the moment on our website, and they will give you the designations of off-road or on-road routes, and include bridleways and walking routes and footpaths as well. So you can see outside the towns where things go as well. And we've started to include issues where we've got places like Sudbury, where you go into Essex, for instance, which is including across the border routes as well. So that's a way of doing it. It's not quite the same as you say, an app, which is much more useful and interactive on a bike ride. But they are available already, I think.
Okay, that's helpful. John, I saw your hand go up. Did you want to come in?
Yeah, just to respond to your point, really, there is a website called Cycle Streets, which you put in your origin and destination, and it will suggest a route. The only caveat I would put on that is they do sometimes suggest you go along private driveways and things, but it's a good. It will cover bridleways and what have you, and suggest the best cycle route. And I have used it quite a bit.
I will try those out. So we're coming to the closing few minutes of the meeting. Any last points from anyone? Lots of ideas generated, you know, Paul and Carl with all your photos there. Huge amount of potential for schemes and projects, which we'll obviously discuss. I've got John, that's just, sorry, another John Cross, that's raised his hand. John?
Thank you very much, Nick. I was just going to say one thing, which is actually not cycling related, but everybody else who uses the road. I ride on everything from the A12 to bits of mud that I probably shouldn't be on. And we have got to recognise we do have articulated lorries, we do have livestock transporters, we do have combine harvesters and all sorts of things on the roads in East Suffolk. All of them there legitimately, but somehow we've got to get all road users to be agreeing with the strategy. There's no point deploying something, spending a lot of money on signage and closing roads off and that sort of thing, if it just kicks the can down the road and you create a bigger problem somewhere else. Ultimately, we need to encourage more people to walk and to cycle. And that will probably be through holding events and as Rachel said, getting bicycles available that don't cost £1,500 and just fill boats coming over from China, and getting everybody buying in to the new strategy.
Thank you, John. Carl, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I was going to make a very similar point to what John just made, to be fair, is that one of the single biggest challenges we have is actually educating people about what the alternatives are and how easy it is to do them. I've got a sense from this hour and a half that a lot of the people on this call are all of the same mindset. I haven't felt the need, I haven't been challenged much. I haven't, unless anyone's in the call that's a really keen driver and hates sustainable transport, I haven't had a sense that the people that are in this call are all of a like mind. And the challenge for us is to try and speak to those people that perhaps want to live in their car and drive up and down, and I call them metal boxes, want to drive up and down their metal box, come what may, and how do we reach out to those people and start to show them that there is a suitable alternative?
Yeah, really good point, Carl. That's a key thing, and it is a theme that emerged in the earlier session as well about communication of a lot of this stuff. Right, I'm going to have to bring this session to a close. Unfortunately, I'm sure we could talk a lot more. Just like to thank all of our speakers: Andrew Summers, Carl Ashton, Paul Horn, Jason Beck and Anthony Taylor. Great presentations. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone else for contributing in the comments and verbally as well. Some brilliant points. We won't lose those. We will capture those all, because what we want to do is feed them into our transport group, which forms part of the community partnership board, which has recently been set up. We want to make sense of all of these ideas, the things that are going on at the various tiers, whether locally, regionally, nationally, and try and make sense of them and pull them together. Some of you on the call will be invited into those sessions because we need your help to make sense of this, and then hopefully we'll bring lots of great initiatives to Suffolk working in unison together, because this is the whole idea of these partnerships. Some great opportunities presented. We will follow those up and hopefully at some point be able to report back with some good news. Carl, did you want to come in again, or was that an old hand? No, you're okay.
Sorry, it's an old hand. Sorry about that.
That's fine. No problem at all. So just lastly say thanks again and enjoy the rest of your day. And sorry, I should also say thanks to Luke Bennett and Jane Cole for arranging all of this, because there's a lot of hard work that goes on behind the scenes. So well done. It's worked really well. And there's some more sessions to enjoy tomorrow and Friday. So thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. That was fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick, and all your team. Very good. Carl and Paul and Anthony, Jason.